There is a woman standing barefoot in the rain at 2:37 in the morning, and she is bleeding from a cut above her left eye, and her dress, which costs more than most people's monthly rent, is torn at the shoulder, and she is running toward a future she cannot see because the past she is running from has finally become more terrifying than the unknown. Her name is Amara. She is 31 years old. She has been married for 9 years to a man named Julian Carrington, who appears on the covers of business magazines and sits on the boards of hospitals and universities and donates money to charities with the practiced generosity of a man who understands that public virtue purchases private immunity. Julian Carrington is one of the wealthiest men in the city. His fortune was inherited, multiplied, weaponized. He controls real estate empires and shipping networks and the kind of political connections that turn laws into suggestions. He also controls his wife. Not obviously. Not in the way that draws attention. Julian has never hit Amara in public. He has never raised his voice at her in front of dinner guests. He has never left a mark that a dress could not cover or a bruise that makeup could not conceal. Julian's violence is architectural. It is structural. It exists in the withdrawal of money when she displeases him, in the locked bedroom door when he decides she requires discipline, in the systematic dismantling of every friendship and family connection she had before the marriage until she existed entirely within the borders of his world, with no allies, no exit, no evidence that the life she had lived before Julian was anything other than a dream she once had and woke from. For 9 years, Amara survived this. She performed the role. She smiled at galas. She posed for photographs. She wore the dresses and the diamonds and the dutiful expression of a woman who had everything. And the world believed her because the world wanted to believe her. Because acknowledging that the woman in the mansion was a prisoner would have required the world to do something about it. And the world does not do things about problems that involve men as powerful as Julian Carrington. But tonight, something inside Amara broke. Not her spirit, her fear. The fear that had kept her compliant, that had convinced her that escape was impossible, that had whispered every night that leaving Julian would mean being hunted, dragged back, and punished in ways that would make the past 9 years look like mercy. That fear cracked. It happened in the library. Julian had discovered that Amara had hidden $300 in cash inside a book, money she had been saving in tiny increments for 2 years, $5 here, $10 there, stolen from grocery receipts and change left on counters. $300 was nothing to Julian. $300 was a rounding error in his quarterly expenses. But it was not about the money. It was never about the money. It was about the fact that Amara had hidden something from him. And hidden things were evidence of independent thought. And independent thought was the first crack in the system of control that Julian had spent 9 years building around her. He stood in front of her with the book in his hand and the cash on the desk between them, and he asked her, in the quiet, measured voice that preceded all his worst acts, what she had been planning to do with it. She told him the truth, because 9 years had taught her that lying made it worse. She said she had been saving it in case of emergency, in case she needed something. Just in case. Julian nodded. He understood. Just in case meant just in case I want to leave. Just in case meant she still thought about escape. Just in case meant the system was failing. He locked her in the bedroom, told her she would remain there until she understood that there was no emergency that required money he had not already provided. No need that existed outside his provision. No world that existed outside his control. She sat on the floor of that locked bedroom for 3 hours. And something happened that had not happened before. Instead of submitting, instead of waiting for Julian to decide she had learned her lesson and unlock the door, instead of performing the contrition that would allow the system to resume, Amara looked at the window. The window overlooked the garden. The garden had a wall. The wall had a gate. And the gate, for the first time in 9 years, had been left unlocked by a landscaper who had forgotten to secure it after trimming the hedges that afternoon. Amara did not think about what would happen if Julian caught her. She did not calculate the odds of success. She did not perform the cost-benefit analysis that 9 years of conditioning had trained her to perform before every decision. She simply stood up, opened the window, climbed out onto the trellis that she had looked at 1,000 times and never considered, and lowered herself into the garden. She walked to the gate. She pushed it open, and she stepped into the street outside the mansion where she had been imprisoned for 9 years, wearing a torn dress and no shoes, with a cut above her eye from where she had scraped against the trellis. and she ran. Subscribe right now. I need you to subscribe because where Amara is running, the man she is about to encounter, and the choice he makes when he finds her, is going to collide with Julian Carrington's power in a way that this city has never seen. Subscribe and stay. She did not know where she was running. She only knew the direction, which was away. Away from the mansion. Away from the locked bedroom. Away from Julian's voice and Julian's rules, and the 9-year architecture of control that had nearly convinced her that the cage was the world. She ran through streets she did not recognize because Julian's mansion was in a part of the city where the wealthy lived behind gates, and the gates were not designed to be exited on foot. She ran until her feet bled. She ran until her lungs burned. She ran until the adrenaline that had carried her out of the window began to thin and the exhaustion underneath it started to surface. And then she turned a corner and entered a neighborhood that was not on any map Julian had ever shown her. The buildings here were older, not decrepit, not abandoned, but aged in the way that buildings age when they are maintained by people who value function over appearance. The storefronts were closed. The streetlights were dimmer. And the air, which Amara had not consciously registered until this moment, felt different, heavier. The way air feels when you cross from one territory into another and your body understands something that your mind has not yet articulated. She had entered someone's domain. She did not know whose. She would find out. A car turned onto the street behind her. Black. Expensive. Moving slowly. Not the speed of someone lost. The speed of someone looking. Amara's body reacted before her mind could. She pressed herself against the wall of a building, into the shadow between two storefronts, making herself as small and as invisible as 9 years of practice had taught her to be. The car passed. Slow. The window was down. A man's voice spoke into a phone in a language Amara recognized as Russian. The car continued down the block, turned left, disappeared. Amara waited. 30 seconds. 60. She counted her breaths the way she counted breaths when Julian was in one of his moods, and she needed to stay calm, needed to keep her body still so it would not trigger his attention. She stepped out of the shadow. She looked left, right. The street was empty. She chose a direction. She walked, and then a door opened 10 feet in front of her. Not violently, not with the crash of forced entry or the aggression of an ambush. The door simply opened, and a man stepped out. And Amara stopped walking because the man was looking directly at her, and the look was not surprise. It was recognition, not of her specifically, of her situation, of the torn dress and the bleeding feet and the cut above the eye and the posture of a woman who had been running and was still running and did not know where to run next. The man was tall, broad, somewhere in his early 50s. He had the kind of face that suggested he had seen most of what the world had to offer and had not been impressed. He looked at Amara for 3 seconds. Then he turned his head slightly and spoke to someone inside the building behind him. Dmitri, come here. Another man appeared. Younger. 35, maybe 40. Dark hair. Dark eyes. The kind of stillness that belongs to people who have been trained to wait, to watch, to move only when movement is required and not a moment before. Dmitri looked at Amara. He said something in Russian to the older man. The older man nodded. Then he looked back at Amara and spoke in English, accented but clear. You are hurt. You are running. You do not know where you are. Come inside. Amara did not move. 9 years had taught her that men who offered help were men who wanted something in return, and what they wanted in return was always more expensive than the help they provided. I am not going to hurt you, the older man said. But if you stay on this street, someone else will. This is not your neighborhood. You crossed a line. You are in Volkov territory now. And Volkov territory is not safe for a woman alone at 3 in the morning. I do not know what that means, Amara said. Her voice came out hoarse. She had not spoken to anyone except Julian in weeks. Her throat had forgotten how to shape words for an audience that was not him. The older man smiled. Not warmly, but not unkindly either. It means you are standing in front of the one door in this city that will not send you back to whoever you are running from. It means you can come inside. Or you can keep running and see how far you get before someone else finds you. Your choice. Amara looked at the door, then at the street, then at the older man and the younger man whose name was Dmitri and who was still watching her with the stillness that made her body want to run and her mind want to stay because her mind understood something her body did not. That stillness was not threat. It was discipline. And discipline, paradoxically, was safer than chaos. She walked toward the door. The older man stepped aside. Dmitri stepped aside. She walked through the door into a hallway that smelled like cigar smoke and old wood, and something else she could not name, but that felt, inexplicably, like the opposite of Julian's mansion. The mansion smelled like money. This hallway smelled like work. The older man closed the door behind her. He locked it. 3 locks. Heavy, mechanical, the kind of locks that are not decorative. Sit, he said, gesturing to a chair in a small room off the hallway. The room had a desk and a lamp and a couch that looked like it had been sat on by 1,000 men, having 1,000 conversations that no one outside this room would ever hear. Amara sat. Her feet left small, wet prints on the floor. Blood and rainwater. She pulled them up underneath her the way she always did, minimizing her presence, apologizing for the space she occupied. The older man saw it. She could tell he saw it because something in his face changed. Not softened. Sharpened. The way a face sharpens when a person sees something they recognize, and the recognition activates a response that is older than thought. My name is Anton, he said. This is Dmitri. We work for a man named Alexei Volkov. You are in his building. You are safe here. No one will touch you. No one will take you anywhere you do not want to go. Understand? Amara nodded. Who are you running from? She hesitated. 9 years of silence. 9 years of Julian's voice in her head saying that no one would believe her, that she was his wife and wives do not run, that anything she said would sound like the complaint of a spoiled woman who did not appreciate the life she had been given. My husband, she said. Anton nodded. Does he know you are gone? By now, yes. Will he look for you? Yes. Does he have resources? Yes. Money. Connections. Influence. He is Julian Carrington. The room went still. Not silent. Still. The way a room goes still when a name is spoken that rearranges the furniture. Dmitri looked at Anton. Anton looked at Dmitri. Then Anton looked at Amara with a new expression, one that contained calculation and something that might have been respect. Julian Carrington. The Julian Carrington. Real estate. Shipping. Sits on the board of half the institutions in this city. Yes. And you are his wife. I was his wife. I left. Anton sat down in the chair across from her. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands folded in front of him, the posture of a man who was about to say something important and wanted to make sure it was heard. Do you know where you are? He asked. You said Volkov territory. Do you know what that means? No. It means you have run from one of the most powerful men in this city and into the territory of the only man who does not give a shit about his power. Amara looked at him. I do not understand. Anton smiled. You will. Alexei is upstairs. He is going to want to meet you. And when he does, you are going to tell him everything. And he is going to decide what to do. And whatever he decides, Julian Carrington is not going to like it. Subscribe right now. Because when Amara meets Alexei Volkov, when she tells him what Julian did, and when Alexei makes his decision, the entire city is going to feel it. Subscribe and do not leave. Alexei Volkov was sitting in a chair by the window when Anton brought Amara upstairs. The window overlooked the street. The rain had stopped. The city stretched out beyond the glass, dark and wet and indifferent to the small dramas occurring inside its buildings. Alexei did not turn when they entered. He was looking at the street. His posture was relaxed in the way that certain men are relaxed, not because they are at ease, but because tension is a waste of energy and energy is a resource that should not be wasted. He was 46 years old. He had been running the Volkov organization for 18 years, since his father died, and left him an empire built on the kind of work that legitimate society pretends does not exist. Shipping, protection, information, the movement of money and goods and influence through channels that operated parallel to the law, close enough to touch it, far enough to avoid it. Alexei was not the loudest man in the city. He was not the flashiest. He was not the one whose name appeared in newspapers or whose face appeared at charity events. He was the man those men called when they needed something done that could not be done through official channels. He was infrastructure. He was the foundation underneath the visible world. And foundations, by design, are not seen. He turned from the window. He looked at Amara. And Amara, who had spent 9 years being looked at by Julian in ways that made her skin feel like it was being inventoried, experienced something different. Alexei looked at her the way a doctor looks at a patient. Assessing, not judging. Looking for the injury so it could be addressed. Sit down, he said. His voice was low, unaccented. American. His father had been Russian. His mother had been from Philadelphia. The combination had produced a man who moved between worlds without belonging fully to either. Amara sat. Anton and Dmitri stood by the door. Anton tells me you are running from Julian Carrington. Yes. How long were you married? 9 years. Why are you running now? The question was not judgmental. It was logistical. Why tonight and not any other night? What changed? What broke? Amara told him. About the money. About the locked bedroom. About the window and the trellis and the gate that had been left unlocked. She told him without crying because 9 years had taught her that crying made men uncomfortable and uncomfortable men became unpredictable. She told him the way you tell a mechanic what is wrong with your car. Factually. Precisely. So the problem can be diagnosed and the repair can be made. Alexei listened. He did not interrupt. He did not ask clarifying questions. He absorbed the information the way a computer absorbs data, completely, without commentary. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he stood. He walked to the window. He looked at the street. Julian Carrington, he said, speaking to the glass, is a man who believes that money and connections make him untouchable. He is not entirely wrong. Money and connections have insulated him from consequences for most of his life. But money and connections are not the same as power. They are tools, and tools only work in the hands of someone who knows how to use them. He turned back to Amara. I am going to ask you a question, and I need you to answer it honestly. Do you want to go back to him? No. Not even if staying away means losing everything you had. The house, the money, the life. That was not my life. That was his life. I was just living inside it. Alexei nodded. Good. Because here is what is going to happen. Julian is going to look for you. He is going to use every resource he has. Private investigators, police contacts, social networks. He is going to find out that you were seen in this neighborhood. He is going to make inquiries. And someone is going to tell him that you walked into Volkov territory. And then he is going to try to take you back. He will come here. Or he will send people. Or he will use his connections to pressure me into returning you. And I am going to tell him no. Amara stared at him. Why? You do not know me. You do not owe me anything. Alexei looked at her. And for the first time, something that was almost warmth crossed his features. I do not need to know you to know what you are running from. I grew up in a house where my mother ran from my father 6 times. 6 times she left. And 6 times he found her. And 6 times she came back because she had nowhere to go and no one to protect her. The 7th time, she did not run. She died. He said it without emotion. Without performance. The way you described the weather. I was 14, he continued. I could not protect her. I did not have what I have now. But I have it now. And you walked through my door. And no woman is going to walk through my door running from a man and be sent back. Not while I am alive. Subscribe. Right now. Subscribe because what Julian does when he finds out where Amara is, and the war that erupts between him and Alexei, is going to be the most satisfying thing you have heard in a long time. Subscribe. Julian Carrington discovered that his wife was in Volkov territory within 18 hours. He had investigators. He had police contacts. He had cameras reviewed and witnesses questioned and a network of people who owed him favors. By noon the next day, he knew that Amara had been seen entering a building on the east side, and by 2 o'clock he knew that the building belonged to Alexei Volkov. Julian made a phone call, not to Alexei, to a city councilman who owed him money and influence and the kind of debt that could not be repaid with cash. Julian explained the situation. His wife had been taken by a criminal organization. He needed her returned. Immediately, the city councilman made a call to the police commissioner. The police commissioner made a call to a captain. The captain sent 2 detectives to the building on the east side. The detectives knocked on the door. Anton answered. He looked at their badges. He looked at their faces. He smiled. Can I help you? We are looking for a woman named Amara Carrington. We have reason to believe she is in this building. Do you have a warrant? We do not need a warrant if she is here against her will. Is she here against her will? The detectives hesitated. Because the answer to that question required them to have spoken to Amara, and they had not spoken to Amara because Anton had not let them inside. We would like to speak to her, and I would like you to come back with a warrant. The door closed. The detectives returned to the precinct. They reported to the captain. The captain reported to the commissioner. The commissioner called the city councilman. The city councilman called Julian. Julian was not accustomed to doors closing in his face. Not literal doors. Not metaphorical ones. Doors opened for Julian Carrington. They had always opened. His entire life had been a series of doors opening because his name and his money and his connections had turned locks into decorations. But the door to Volkov territory did not open. Julian tried a different approach. He called Alexei directly. The number was not listed. But Julian had resources. He acquired the number. He dialed it. Alexei answered. This is Alexei. This is Julian Carrington. You have my wife. I do not have your wife. Your wife is here. There is a difference. I want her returned. She does not want to be returned. That is not your decision to make. It is not your decision either. It is hers. And she has made it. You do not know who you are dealing with. Alexei laughed. It was not a warm laugh. It was the laugh of a man who has heard this sentence before, many times, from many men, and has watched every single one of them discover that the sentence was built on a foundation that could not support its weight. Julian, Alexei said, I know exactly who I am dealing with. A man who believes that money makes him powerful. A man who has spent 9 years breaking his wife and is now upset that she escaped. A man who is accustomed to doors opening because no one has ever told him no. I am telling you no. Your wife is not coming back. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not ever. And if you send police or investigators or anyone else to this building, I will make it very clear to those people that their association with you is more expensive than their paycheck. He hung up. Julian sat in his office, in his mansion, surrounded by the evidence of his power and his wealth and his influence, and he felt something he had not felt since he was a child. Helplessness. Not because Alexei was more powerful, but because Julian's power, which was built on money and connections and the ability to apply pressure through official channels, did not work in the territory Alexei controlled. Alexei's territory operated on different rules. Rules that money could not purchase and influence could not bend. Julian did not accept helplessness. He escalated. He hired a private security firm. 6 men. Experienced. Armed. He sent them to the building on the east side with instructions to retrieve his wife. By force if necessary. The 6 men arrived at 3 in the morning. They approached the building. They did not make it to the door. Dmitri and 4 other men were waiting. The confrontation lasted 90 seconds. No shots were fired. No one died. But the 6 men Julian hired left with injuries that required medical attention and a message that was delivered verbally by Dmitri to the man in charge. Tell Julian Carrington that the next time he sends people to this building, they will not leave. The message was delivered. Julian received it in his office at 8 in the morning. He sat behind his desk, in the house where Amara had been locked in a bedroom, and he understood something that his money and his connections had insulated him from understanding for most of his life. He had lost, not because he lacked resources, because his resources did not work against a man who did not care about the systems Julian operated within. Alexei Volkov did not care about social pressure. He did not care about political influence. He did not care about the veneer of legitimacy that Julian had spent his life constructing. Alexei operated underneath all of that. And underneath, Julian was not powerful. He was just a man who had beaten his wife for 9 years. A man who had locked her in a bedroom. A man who was now sitting in an empty mansion realizing that the woman he had controlled so completely had found the one place in the city his control could not reach. Amara stayed in Volkov territory, not in the building. Alexei moved her to a house on the outskirts of the city, a house that was secure and quiet and surrounded by people whose job was to make sure that no one who was not supposed to be there ever got close. She lived there for 3 months. During that time, she did not see Julian. She did not hear from him. She existed in a space that was not freedom, not exactly, because she was still surrounded by Alexei's world, but it was the closest thing to freedom she had experienced in 9 years. Alexei visited once a week. He brought groceries. He asked how she was. He did not ask her to thank him. He did not ask her for anything. He simply checked on her the way you check on a repair you have made to ensure it is holding. On the 3rd month, Amara asked him a question. Why did you do this for me? Alexei sat across from her at the small kitchen table in the house he had given her. He looked at her with those dark eyes that had seen most of what the world had to offer and had not been impressed. Because no one did it for my mother, he said. And I was 14 and powerless and I watched her die. And I built everything I have built since then so that I would never be powerless again. And when you walked through my door, I had a choice. send you back and remain powerless in the way that matters, or keep you safe and use the power I built for the one thing it was always supposed to be used for. What is that? Protecting the people who cannot protect themselves. Amara looked at him. At this man who ran an organization that operated in the shadows. This man whose name made powerful men nervous. This man who had taken her in when the most powerful man she knew had tried to drag her back and had told that man no and made it stick. What happens now? She asked. Now you decide. You can stay here as long as you need. Or you can leave. Start over somewhere else. I will give you money. Documents. Whatever you need. Julian will not follow you. I have made that very clear to him. You are free, Amara. For the first time in 9 years. What you do with that freedom is up to you. She looked out the window of the small house. At the trees. At the sky. At the world that had been inaccessible to her for so long it had stopped feeling real. I do not know what freedom looks like, she said. Then you learn, Alexei said. One day at a time. One choice at a time. And you learn it without anyone locking you in a room or telling you what you can and cannot do. You learn it here. Or you learn it somewhere else. But you learn it. She looked at him. And for the first time in 9 years, Amara smiled. Not the performed smile of a woman pretending to be happy. The real smile of a woman who has just been told that the cage is open and the door is unlocked and the world outside is waiting. I want to stay, she said. Not forever, but for now. I want to learn what this feels like. Freedom. I want to learn it here. Alexei nodded. Then you stay? As long as you need. He stood. He walked to the door. He stopped and turned back. Amara. Yes. You were never powerless. You survived 9 years of a man trying to break you. You climbed out of a window and ran barefoot through a city you did not know. You walked into my building and told me the truth when you could have lied. That is not powerlessness. That is strength. Do not forget that. He left. The door closed. Amara sat in the small kitchen of the small house in the territory of a man the city feared, and she felt something she had not felt since before she married Julian Carrington. Safe. And that is where the story ends. Not because Amara's story is over. Because the part that needed to be told has been told. If this story found you, if it reached the place where you have been running, or the place where you have been locked, or the place where you have been told that escape is impossible, then I need you to do something. Subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. Share this with someone who needs to hear that the cage is not permanent. That there are still people in the world who will open the door. That freedom is learned one day at a time. Drop a comment. Tell me what Amara should do next. Tell me if you have ever run from something that everyone said you could not escape. I read every word. The next story is already here. Subscribe. Stay. I will see you there.